Welcome back to the Deep Plea. In this podcast, we aim to have deep conversations about all sorts of interesting topics to engage with and learn more from the world around us. My name is Karthik. The guy on the other side of the mic is Sven,
Hello, hello.
and today we're going to be talking about addiction. Let's get into it with the quote for today. Addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything. Short and sweet. Sven, take it away.
Yeah. Yeah, so of course, this quote is talking about the idea that when people are addicted to something, they're willing to kind of give up everything in order to pursue this drug. It could be any type of drug, it could be some sort of action. And I think that, there's a trend that we see with people, especially that are highly addicted to like opioids and different things, where they'll sell all their stuff away to get to the drug until they have like nothing left. And I think that a kind of a big problem these days is that when you are on drugs or you're addicted to something, your brain is kind of wired to justify your actions because the dopamine reward circuitry is kind of work in a way in which you feel like because you're motivated to get this money to get to the drug, it's the right thing to do. And that kind of feel good, like do that type of chemical is going to be active in a lot of things that should be that way. But because there's a disease going on in the brain where there's like a rewire of circuitries, you're actually completely tricked into thinking that it's like beneficial in what you should do. Even if consciously you're aware, you might think like some people say like when they're recovering, they're like, oh, I just need to get my drug again just once to get well. So I'm not like having these crazy like flu-like symptom withdrawals and stuff like that. And so their brain kind of tricks them into thinking that they still need this drug in some way. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we'll get more into kind of different risk factors and how the brain actually changes. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think when you give up everything, you're also giving up your time, which is something you can't get back. I mean, that's from my experience with addictions such as like video games or I guess entertainment in general. Uh, I really looked back at it and thought, dang, I gave up a lot of my time to do something that wasn't really that beneficial for me. Uh,
Right.
and I guess when I have a kind of recovery, then I'm able to use more time to do things that I see as beneficial. Because addictions, they, well, they always have a negative connotation, perhaps for a good reason. But
Right.
uh, when we have an addiction, yeah, I guess when we have an addiction, like when I'm recovering from the overstimulation of video games or entertainment, then when I give up that time that I'm using for those activities, then it just kind of opens up the dam to
Right.
different choices, different possibilities that my life could go instead of being constricted to a certain subset of actions just because your brain thinks that it's actually beneficial, even when you actually might know that it's not, but your brain is rewired to kind of think that way. And now let's get into
Yeah.
our easy question for today. Why does the brain gravitate towards addiction and comfort? Does the biology of the brain see a benefit? And one quote I want to take from a research study, which will be linked in the description, is it talks about addiction. Uh, it is considered a brain disorder because it involves functional changes to brain circuits involved in reward, stress, and self-control. And those changes may last a long time after a person has stopped taking drugs, or I guess has done any other addictive action. Um,
Right.
and I think the brain gravitates towards addiction and comfort just because if we see something, right, in our environment that is comfortable, we want to naturally kind of go towards that. Like
Right.
if you put in front of me a cheesecake, I don't have the willpower to kind of be like, I won't eat it. I will not do
Right.
it because it's just right there. It's right there in front of me. And I think your phone is a great, your brain will gravitate towards, if you get a notification, you have to pick up your phone. Like kind of that like circuitry is changing. We can see that
Right.
in very simple things like notifications. Um, and another
Yeah.
quote, I think from the same article, brain imaging studies of people with addiction show physical changes in areas of the brain that are critical to judgment, decision making, learning and memory, and behavior control. These changes help explain the compulsive nature of addiction. So obviously this is like if we talk about addiction and we have a general idea of it, this makes sense because people are not the same as they were before.
Hmm.
People, I guess, let's say they're in a neutral state, and then you start to slowly see that their life kind of revolves around one certain activity, and you kind
Right.
of, I feel like you can kind of like see it, even if someone doesn't really talk about it. Uh, Sven, let me
Yes,
pass it
I
over to
kind
you.
of like right. So like what you said, well, I think like of course the brain of changes anatomically, and that's usually because when you do in a like if you have an addiction, it's going to anatomically change the neural pathways over and over again since you're repeating the behavior. But aside from that, like biologically, I do also think that the idea of like having an escape, so like you said, video games or people that take hard drugs or people that drink and go out socially, they're escaping from a life that they don't necessarily like, but the brain thinks it's beneficial because they're getting a break from that kind of life that they think they don't want to bear. And so in that way, I think that the brain may look at it as beneficial because if you have someone who, let's say, they work a 9 to 5 and they don't like their job, but they kind of do it just to get by and they have a family, and then they come home and they're alcoholics and they drink and then maybe they misbehave or something like that. The brain is saying though that when you get home from work and you can have that drink, that's kind of like the reward at the end of the day, and that's kind of like the benefit. That's why you kind of do it. So when people, maybe you have high functioning people that take like uppers, like businessmen that may take cocaine and all this stuff, that's kind of their way of maintaining their work ethic, without being like they're not going to be sober doing it, and that kind of also changes the brain, of course, over time. But even moving again away from biology, I think that the big takeaway is that it's either an escape or you kind of go into another world that you're not going into before, and I think the brain finds that beneficial. Yeah.
I guess as the brain perhaps prefers that kind of novelty experience where things are different
Right, like the
than
first time
the
a lot of
life
people
that
smoke weed.
that the are different than the life that you're living right now, like you said. So as
Yeah.
an escape, or perhaps in due time the escape becomes the reality.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll ask you
Right,
the
and then and
hard. Oh, sorry, keep going.
I was gonna say that then it's the opposite. Then relapsing kind of becomes like you're escaping the drug now rather than using an escape. So relapsing kind of becomes that escape that you're trying to escape the drug. But yeah.
Oh my, that's like that, and then yeah, then that's the novel experience.
Right.
Oh my. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of other factors on why the brain might gravitate towards addiction. Uh, I read, uh, we do a little bit of research here at the Deep Plea. Not too much,
Yes.
but a little bit. Uh, there are some biological factors, environmental factors, like if we talk about environment versus willpower, again, like we have many
Mhm.
times. And there are also genetic risk factors. So, one of the actually, I'd like to talk about it. One of the important genetic factors is the dopamine D2 receptor that I found. I don't know if you know about this, Sven, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's about how the individual's brain handles the dopamine receptors.
Right.
And some people might be more vulnerable to getting addictions. Uh,
Right.
do you have any addition to this?
I mean, yeah, reward sensitivity is huge. I mean, I think if you want to really envision it the best way possible, it's going to be a child because when you have a kid and everything is very new to them and they're absorbing information fast and their brain is very excitable, very small things like a kid doing this joke or something like that is going to make them super like hype. And it's kind of that same idea, but for an adult, it'd be with like a substance or something. But it's that insane sensitivity to reward, and usually that comes with a flip flop. Whereas if you don't have that dopamine, you don't have that reward that's coming in, you actually might be super low, and you're actually trying to chase it. So you try and find baseline by doing all these things to get it back up. But yeah, I think that sensitivity to reward genetically is definitely a big thing.
All right, Sven, let me ask you the hard question for today. Can addictions be beneficial? You gave some examples of a mother addicted to helping her child, and I gave an
Mm-hmm.
example of a man addicted to the internet to learn about things that he's interested in, perhaps to make himself a better person. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I think, of course, in moderation. Well, I guess addiction, if it becomes something that makes you unstable or it kind of messes up your day to day life in a bad way, that becomes a disorder. Then, yes. However, I think it's a spectrum of like a mother caring for a child. It's like she could do that 24/7. But if she does that too much, she actually would get sleep deprivation, for example, and then she wouldn't be able to take care of the child. So it's like you still need to find a way to maintain the addiction and not overload it because eventually you will come to some sort of stop where what you were trying to achieve you can't anymore because most likely you've just run dry of energy or something like that. I think that, in the brain you have, food and water, like that's what your brain is going for, and that's kind of like a positive thing your brain is addicted to, not necessarily like very fast paced addiction. It's not like when people use nicotine, it goes in and goes out very quickly, but it's kind of within like a 24 to 48-hour time frame where your body is going to release a lot of chemicals to say that you're hungry, that you have to go get food. And, anatomically you will change, if you do or don't do those things, same thing that we talked about before. Um, but yeah, I think that it can't ever be like justified, because if an addiction is actually an addiction that we're talking about, then it's something that is going to run you dry eventually, and you won't be able to do that thing that you were thinking was like beneficial.
Yeah, I want to bring up a idea I thought of is I mean I agree with what you're saying. I mean we have the old idea that anything in excess is not beneficial at some point,
Right.
whether that takes a lot of time or just too much effort. Um, I think that we want to plan our addictions, I guess, to be uh, subtle enough that they work in the long term. So, meaning like, let's say we're addicted to learning things on the internet. Then we spend our certain amount of time every day learning things on the internet, but we make sure that it's not like addict we make an addiction for the long term to make sure it's good in the long term. But then I was thinking perhaps if we always think about the long term, we're always thinking about the best potential for your future self, but perhaps that addiction to the long term delays your gratification, to get some gratification in the short term, maybe forever. And it's kind of like a complicated cycle of that. Okay, if we have an addiction that we want our future self to be as best as it can be, then we actually might delay our gratification. And I believe I think it's a Stoic quote that life was enjoyed. It's something around the lines of life was enjoyed by the people who took time to enjoy it,
Hmm.
which might not happen. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a like when it comes to addiction, I think that's like disorderly. But if you can say that you can order your addiction into like over time into steps, I would say that's more like habitual. Because
Hmm.
I think that if you are truly like addicted, then setting a schedule for your addiction most likely isn't going to pan out necessarily. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know too. Like, what was the question again? Fuck.
I guess like, I don't know if it was really a question, more just like a statement, but I guess bouncing off of that, like my dad, for example, has waked up or woken up early in the morning for the past maybe freaking 40 years of his life, but you wouldn't call that, I guess, an addiction because it's not seen as that. It's seen as a routine.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Um, yeah, you wouldn't really think of it that way, huh? So I guess like there's a we
Well, it
have
could be
to
habitual.
yeah we have to differentiate between what is an addiction and what is habitual. Because I
Yeah,
guess like we think the bad habits are the addictions and the good habits are just the good things we do or whatever it might be
yeah,
are the good habits. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else to add?
yeah. I think another good way to kind of imagine this is like, someone might say that they're addicted to the gym, but it's like they wouldn't sneak out of work. You go to the gym and get a few reps in, and then hopefully not be seen go back to work, or they might not in the middle of the night sneak out of the house just to go to the gym and do some bench press all secret. But I think that's kind of like when people say they're addicted to something. I think that there's a difference again between like habitual and addiction. But yeah, I think I guess kind of stepping away and looking at holistically, I think that there's a big problem in society with when you have pharmaceutical industries that give out like these medications, or you have these kids giving all these given all these technologies, and you have kind of this whole world of people. And again, addiction kills like most of the world, like illness and disease, like whatever, cigarettes, alcohol, like drugs, like all these things. And I think that, we need to develop mechanisms in which we can kind of almost by force, like opioid blockers, like, stopping the opioid receptors from getting the opioid. Like, we just need to do something, trying to look at this from like a world view, because I think a lot of people aren't necessarily educated, growing up in schools about these types of things. What do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is that we're just like taught. We're not really taught how
We're
to.
told like drugs are bad, but not like how it happens.
I mean, yeah, we're taught drugs are bad, but people still do them for their own reasons. I don't know.
Right.
That's kind of it, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the place to end is that
Yeah.
addictions are bad, but people still do them,
That's the power of it.
huh? Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Talk to you next time. Bye.